Sorry, could you say that again? If you could use your mic.
Sorry, I can't nominated Councillor Gibson.
Could I have a seconder?
I'm happy to second Councillor Gibson.
Thank you. If all members are in agreement with that proposal, show of hands, that's great. Thank you so much. Thank you, Councillor Gibson. Can you assume the chair?
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this call-in meeting of the Adults Health and Active Lifestyles Scrutiny Board. My name is Councillor James Gibson, and I'll be chairing today's meeting. And this meeting will be webcast for the benefit of members of the public who may be watching this meeting. I will shortly ask everyone to introduce themselves. Can I remind everyone to mute their microphone once you introduce yourselves? And I'll start with the board members, please, going from the left.
Good morning, Councillor Eleanor Thompson from Guiseley Rawdon Ward, substituting for Councillor Bromley.
Morning, Councillor Kevin Ritchie Bramley and Stanley Ward.
Good morning, Councillor Mahalie France, Mayor for Moortown or Meanwood.
Good morning, Councillor Taylor from Chapel Allerton Ward.
Morning, everyone. Councillor Andy Rowntree from Kirkstall Ward.
Good morning, everyone. Councillor Michael Miller, Kippax and Methley Ward. I'm substituting for Councillor Scopes today.
Councillor Winkage, you're representing Morley South.
Councillor Lynn Buckley representing Allwoodley Ward.
Councillor Chapman substituting for Councillor Hartbrook from Rothwell.
Councillor Barry Anderson from Adlan Wharfdale Ward, substituting for Councillor Caroline Anderson. I do as I'm told.
Thank you, members. A lot of new faces today, but welcome to the meeting. I'll ask officers now to introduce themselves, please.
Nicky O, Legal Services and advisor to the board today.
Angela Brogden, Principal Scrutiny Advisor to this board.
Debbie Oldham, I'm the clerk for the board today.
Great stuff. Thank you very much. I now invite other contributors to today's meeting to introduce themselves. So we'll start with you, Councillor Finnigan, please. You're on the first on my list.
I'm Robert Finnigan. I'm a councillor that represents the Morley North Ward. I'm one of the signatories for the calling request.
I am Carol Edwards. I'm Morley Town Councillor.
Councillor Stuart Golton, Rothwell Ward, bringing the second call-in request.
Just note there that you didn't actually make the formal request to bring in a witness. However, I will allow it on this occasion, so it's fine. But just for future reference, we'll go now then to Councillor Arif, please.
Hi, I'm Councillor Salma Arif. I'm the exec member for Adult Social Care, Active Lifestyles and Culture.
Good morning, I'm Caroline Barrier. I'm the Director for Adults and Health at the Council.
Good morning, I'm Shona McFarlane. I'm Deputy Director for Adults and Health for the Council.
Hi, I'm Carla Gallen. I'm Head of Service for Care Delivery, Adults and Health.
Good morning, I'm Kev Shillito from Legal Services, supporting Adults and Health this morning.
Great stuff. Can we move to items 1 to 5 on the agenda, please?
Thank you, Chair. So under agenda item 1, there are no appeals. Agenda item 2, there's no exempt items. Agenda item 3, in relation to agenda item 7, supplementary information has been provided to the board. This has been referenced as Appendix A1 and presents the additional call-in request form that was received following the publication of the agenda, but before the end of the relevant call-in period. Agenda item 4, could I ask members to declare any interest? I'll take silence as there are none. And under agenda item 5, we have received apologies from Councillor Scopes and Councillor Miller attending as his substitute. Councillor Caroline Anderson and Councillor Barry Anderson is attending as her substitute. Councillor Bromley, Councillor Thompson is attending as her substitute. And Councillor Hartbrook and Councillor Chapman is attending as his substitute. Apologies have also been received from the board's co-opted members, Jane Mischenko and Jonathan Phillips from Leeds Health Watch.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to agenda item number 6 then, please, and I'll introduce Angela.
Thank you, Chair. So in relation to this report, it's been provided to the board to advise members on the procedural aspects of the call-in process. So I'll just highlight a few elements of that report. So this report's received 2 call-in requests for today. These are in line with the executive and decision-making procedure rules that are set out within the Council's constitution. In terms of the grounds for calling in a decision, it's made clear within the procedure rules that a call-in request must detail on the approved call-in request form why, in the opinion of the signatories, the decision was not taken in accordance with the principles of decision-making, which are also set out within the procedure rules as well as in Article 13 of the Constitution, or where relevant issues do not appear to have been taken into consideration. So the call-in requests being considered today relate to an executive board decision that was taken on the 24th of July, and further details surrounding this is provided elsewhere within the agenda pack, including the specific call-in request forms. So the board's advised today that today's meeting is specific to the executive board decision that has been called in, and that issues outside of this decision, including any other related decisions, may not be considered as part of the board's decision in terms of the outcome of the call-in. The board must decide whether the decision was made in accordance with paragraph 4 of the executive and decision-making rules. That is, those matters listed as grounds for call-in in the call-in application. There is a recommended structure for today's meeting, and this is referenced in the report at paragraph 4, and the chair will shortly talk through this as well. So having reviewed the decision, the Scrutiny Board will need to agree what action it wishes to take and may pursue one of 2 courses of action. So option 1 is to release the decision for implementation. If the Scrutiny Board chooses this option, the decision will be released immediately for implementation and may not be called in again. Option 2 is to recommend to the decision maker that the decision be reconsidered. If the Scrutiny Board chooses this option, a report from this Scrutiny Board will be produced and referred to the Executive Board for consideration. And the process for producing this report is also set out in paragraphs 12 to 16 of the agenda report. And if for any reason the board does not agree one of these actions, option 1 is adopted by default, which means that the decision is released for implementation and may not be called in again. I'll pass back to you now, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, just before we do move on to agenda item number 7, I'm just going to reiterate what Angela said, and thank you for that, Angela. Let's keep to the issue at hand, please. Let's not veer off. Okay. Agenda item number 7, adults and health, in-house care home service review, Knoll Manor and Dolphin Manor, post-consultation recommendations report. Moving to item 7, in accordance with the Council's constitution, an Executive Board decision has been called in. This decision was made by the Executive Board on the 24th of July 2024 and relates to adults and health, in-house care home service review, as I've just said, Knoll Manor and Dolphin Manor, post-consultation recommendations report. Within the main agenda pack, members have been provided with several key documents, including pages 15 to 20, a copy of the first receipted call-in request, which references Cllr Finnigan as the nominated lead signatory. Pages 21 to 190, the relevant report of the Director of Adults and Health to the Executive Board on the 24th of July 24, and pages 191 to 192, relevant extract from the draft minutes of the Executive Board meeting held again on the 24th of July 24. Within the supplementary agenda pack, members have been provided with a copy of the additional quorum request form that had been receipted following agenda publication, but before the end of the relevant quorum period. Cllr Golton is referenced as the nominated lead signatory for the request. I'm now going to outline the format for today's meeting. I will first invite Cllr Finnigan to outline the reasons for calling in decision as set out in his call-in request form. I will then invite Cllr Golton to outline the reasons for the call-in decision as set out within his call-in request form. I will then ask Cllr Arif and Caroline Barrier. Sorry, Caroline. I'm just used to calling you Caroline. To respond to the issues raised, noting that we do have other relevant senior officers in the room to whom Caroline may wish to bring into if required. Board members will then be given the opportunity to ask any question and points of clarification of all participants. Once the board members have completed their questioning, I will invite Cllr Arif and Caroline to provide brief closing comments, having heard the board's discussion. I will then invite Cllr Finnigan and Cllr Golton to provide their closing comments. The board will then be asked to vote to determine the outcome of the call-in. Okay, hope that clarified everything and we're all clear on that. And I shall move, as I've set out in the procedure, to invite Cllr Finnigan to outline the reasons for his call-in.
Thanks very much, Chair. Can I pass on my thanks to the Scrutiny Board for attending to listen to what we've got to say, to the Director who has helped us significantly by providing more background, the Exec Board member who has discussed with ward councillors perhaps opportunities to move the thing forward, and the Conservative group who countersigned our request for a call-in. So I'd like to pass on my thanks to all of those. The King's Fund, which is a reputable national organisation, talks about the problems with discharge from hospital, and in 2022 to 2023 analysed that £1.9 million was lost in terms of what most people call bed blocking, or to give it its formal terms, delayed transfer of care. As of February 2024, 13,662 people were blocked in hospital or subject to delayed transfers of care because of the problems in terms of finding them appropriate adult social care outside that. So the problem continues on. What's the analysis of such organisations as the King's Fund as to why there is this, I think we'd all accept, waste of money, where money could be better spent and money is already tight? Well, they talk about limited capacity in rehabilitation and other community-based facilities. And I don't think any of us would disagree that that is actually the case. Now we've led, Maryleborough Independents have led a campaign to try and keep Knoll Manor open. And we're not Luddites. We don't just think it ought to remain open for the sake of remaining open. We think that there are better alternatives that the building could be used for. And over 2,000 people signed a petition online and directly after we spent several Saturdays in Morley Town Centre asking for their help and support, and tend to agree that Knoll Manor could be put to better use. Now, what are we suggesting? Now, we're not suggesting it remains as it is at this particular point. The residents who are presently in there, many of them are in their 80s and 90s, we've suggested that they are allowed to remain there for the rest of their days. Why do we say that? Well, back when Knoll Manor was previously proposed for closure, over a decade ago, we were assured at that particular point that residents wouldn't be moved out of Knoll Manor until there was a better alternative. And that has not, at this particular point, been provided. We are in a situation where we accept that the opportunity for residents to remain there for the rest of their days is one that is finite. They are older people. They've generally got all sorts of problems and difficulties. We think that they deserve a home for life and that they should remain there for the rest of their days without allowing any new admissions. The rest of Knoll Manor, which is an excellent building in my view, good condition, that has the benefit of solar panels, has the benefit of a heat pump. So in terms of environmentally, it is sound and sustainable, should be converted over to be part of a community-based facility and look what it can do to provide the rehabilitation facilities that we need to allow, if you like, fewer people to remain in hospital when they need to be on that pathway, on that journey to going back home. And that's about re-engineering it to become a rehabilitation centre. And that's what we have suggested. We suggested it during the consultation. The director knows that we've suggested it. The exec board member knows that we've suggested that there may be an alternative use for this particular building. Now, many moons ago, we were promised extra care accommodation. Morley does not have any extra care accommodation, notwithstanding everybody, the director, the scrutiny board, everybody in Morley would say that the demand for extra care accommodation in Morley is somewhat overwhelming. We have a view that we need to explore with all vigour extra care. We did raise this over a decade ago. We are no further down that particular path. But why are we suggesting that this particular facility should become a community-based facility? Well, one of the relevant issues that has changed since we started this particular process is a change of government. People are fully aware of that. That is a relevant change. That is something that we need to reflect about. The initial decision to explore the closure of Knoll Manor was undertaken under the previous government, and I'm sort of disappointed Barry and his colleagues, but the previous government weren't particularly sensitive or supportive to adult social care and didn't provide the opportunities and the finance at that particular point. But we are under new arrangements. We do have a new government, and as I am sure colleagues across the table from me will be aware and will have read, change, the Labour Party Manifesto 2024 at this particular point. Excellent reading. I'm sure they will have read the issues that relate to adult social care and the NHS and that link and that relationship between the two. And indeed, our suggestion, our alternative, is entirely in line with manifesto commitments that the government is promising to deliver upon. Indeed, page 100 of the manifesto talks about to achieve this, and this is a change, healthcare closer to home. The National Health Service needs to move to a neighbourhood health service with more care delivered in local communities. Don't think any of us disagree. Spot problems earlier. To achieve this, we must over time shift resources to primary care and community services. So the government, the newly elected government, is of a view that more community services, more rehabilitation and opportunities for people to get themselves into a re-enabled stage to go back home. This is where we all agree that finance and support should be transferred to. And indeed, in terms of social care report at page 102, Labour is committed to ensuring everyone lives an independent, prosperous life. Social care is vital to achieve this, but hundreds of thousands of people suffer without the care they need for a dignified life. And later on, it says services will be locally delivered with a principle of home first that supports people living independently for as long as possible. Our new standards will ensure high quality care and ongoing sustainability and ensure providers behave responsibility. Labour will develop local partnership working between the NHS and social care on hospital discharge. So our alternative proposal at this particular point is entirely and utterly in line with the new government's manifesto commitments at this particular point to make sure that you have that local service, that re-enabling service, that rehabilitation service. And that's why we are suggesting that this decision needs to be looked at again. Now, being in government is all about choices. You can choose to do this and choose not to do that. The new government has chosen to spend 9.4 billion on public sector pay rises. Most of us would say we entirely utterly understand that. 11.6 billion on overseas aid for climate change.
We're
8.3.
getting very political, Councillor Finnigan.
Well,
and you know, this is meant to be apolitical. It is meant to be an apolitical scrutiny committee. I get the point. Yeah, I think you have made the point though.
Well, the point is 1.9 billion, which is what we could get if we unblocked the bed blocking. If we had a better approach to delayed transfer of care, would provide the resource to make sure that Knoll Manor continues to thrive. So the bottom line really is we want to save this facility. Everybody knows it's an excellent facility. It is sustainable. It has solar panels. It has a heat pump at this particular point. There is an opportunity to relook at this particular decision and support the direction of travel, suggested direction of travel that central government are talking about in terms of providing a local care service, a care service that would enable people to get out of hospital quicker, to be re-enabled, to be rehabilitated through the appropriate processes so that they can return home quicker. That, in a nutshell, is why we're asking this scrutiny board to ask executive board to take another look under the new circumstances, the new direction of travel that is being proposed at this particular point. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Finnigan. We'll move to Councillor Golton.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to agree with Councillor Finnigan that I'm very grateful that members have come out today in a period where many people take their vacations to consider a very important matter, and I know that you'll do it in a very professional way. I will present the argument for the call-in in a manner that the Chair requested, which is that I emphasise how I feel there has been a deficiency in the quality of decision making here, not whether or not the administration has the right to make the decisions that it has. My argument is that you have not been given the information that you require to make the right decision. So I'll go through it bit by bit. So in terms of the reasons for calling, there are very specific reasons for calling which are emphasised, and I'm going to argue that following those reasons that are deemed appropriate, we don't feel that there has been due consultation and taking of professional advice from officers in putting together this decision. We don't feel that there has been a respect for human rights displayed in the decision sufficiently. We don't think there has been a presumption in favour of openness in making this decision. And we don't believe that there is a clarity of aims and desired outcomes in the making of this decision. We also feel that there has not been an explanation of the options considered and details of the reasons for the decision. And ultimately, because of that, it hasn't actually delivered a decision which delivers natural justice. And I'll just go through the details of the grounds for stating that. In terms of the issue around a clarity of aims and desired outcomes, the title of the decision says that the closure of Knoll Manor and repurposing of Dolphin Manor is the result of a review of the in-house care homes service. However, such a review of the service should take into consideration all the residential care homes currently provided by Leeds City Council. This service review excludes the Spring Gardens care home in Otley, and through its omission fails to clarify the council's commitment to its future status, and as the last remaining in-house residential home, what commitment the council has to it in the future. A service review should also take into consideration what role the council sees in their in-house provision playing within the residential care market in the city in the future. It's absent from this report. In particular, there is no consideration of the value of a mixed economy in residential care provision, nor the risk of reliance on the private sector to provide residential accommodation in the city. Officers often refer to a saturated private provision in the city. However, recent data suggests a significant reduction in care homes nationally and instability within the private care market due to staffing pressures and profitability. There is no longer-term consideration of the value of retaining a sufficient level of in-house provision to counter the potential for care cost inflation when overly reliant on the private sector. And we have seen the consequences of that in terms of the children's care budget in the city at the moment, how every year we overspend because of our reliance on the private sector. This is all the more surprising as this review was introduced as a budget proposal. There is no risk assessment or consideration that a modest budget saving this financial year through closure and reprovision of 2/3 of the in-house provision might actually precipitate higher costs for council care packages in the future through greater reliance on a smaller number of private providers. No alternative options were offered for each of the affected homes in the council's in-house provision. The only option for Noel Manor was closure, and the only option for Dolphin Manor was repurposing. There was no option for understanding how retention as residential care facilities might be improved to deliver a better financial outcome for the city through a different approach to that which is currently done. It appears that the overriding motivation for the review of care home provision was the ability to bid for an integrated care board contract for the sole provision of intermediate care facilities in the city, and that the only criteria for consideration for the site of that intermediate care facility was the level of refurbishment already achieved. Furthermore, the decision to close Dolphin Manor as a residential care home was taken without the contract mentions actually having been won. The contract award has still yet to be decided, and if unsuccessful, the council has not identified in this decision alternative future use plans for this facility if it does not win the contract and it does not become an intermediate care facility. The consultation process has not been applied consistently within the service review. Noel Manor was allocated a full stakeholder consultation, according to the papers, which included elected member and community engagement on the principle of closing the facility. However, no wider stakeholder consultation has taken place on the principle of repurposing Dolphin Manor to an intermediate care facility, despite this also meaning the closure of the facility as a residential care home. The only consultation has been a closed process between residents and families and adult social care to explain the consequences of repurposing and to oversee the transfer to alternative accommodation of current residents. This has led to unnecessary confusion as to whether consultation engagement would alter the decision to repurpose the facility. Finally, in terms of respect for human rights and natural justice, in-house care home residents are effectively council tenants, as these facilities are their homes. As their landlord, we have a duty of care. The council has made a point of opposing no-fault evictions by private landlords. However, in forcing people out of their home to create a vacant asset to enable the council to increase their income from a possible outside contract, this is effectively a no-fault eviction, while the council placing business needs above the collective individual needs of residents. The service review has therefore actually been an asset rationalisation plan based on maximising income generation from partner agencies, rather than a strategy to secure the best value and quality care for current residents within the facilities, nor the immediate communities that they serve, nor the wider city in terms of the council being a participant in the direct delivery of residential care. On these grounds, I think it is worth calling the decision in for reconsideration. Thank you for your indulgence, Chair.
Thank you, Cllr Golton, and thank you for sticking to the spirit of this committee, which I'll reiterate is apolitical. It's not the opportunity for us to tear lumps out of each other and be party political. Of course, that doesn't preclude critiques of governments past or present, but let's stick to how this should be conducted and keep it apolitical, please. I will now ask Councillor Arif and Caroline Barrier to respond to the issues raised, noting that we have other relevant senior officers in the room to who Caroline may wish to bring in to if required. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll make a start if that's okay. So as mentioned at Exec Board on 24th of July, this report follows the decision taken at December's Executive Board to consult on the proposals made as part of the Council's budget setting process for 2024 and 2025. A detailed process of consultation has taken place involving speaking to residents, families, staff at Knoll Manor and Dolphin Manor, and local elected members who have provided feedback through other channels. The context for these recommendations is that the use of residential care homes has declined over the last few years, with people choosing to remain at home for longer or accessing alternative services, including extra care that is now available. The council has made significant investment in extra care across the city, such as Gascoigne House in Middleton and in the Rothwell ward, the newly opened scheme, the Sycamores in Woodlesford, which consists of 62 units, all of which the council has nomination rights for local residents. The success of the extra care schemes accounts for some of the reduction in demand for residential care homes that is set out in the report. It is recognised how difficult these changes are to valued services provided by the councils are, particularly when they are provided directly to residents and valued by their families. The proposal to close Knoll Manor and repurpose Dolphin Manor as a short-term intermediate care service was not made easily. There is, however, an overriding duty for the council to achieve a balanced budget. This decision makes a contribution to the council's budget setting process, and while it impacts on individuals, there are mitigations in place, such as the council's care guarantee. The care guarantee has supported the previous care home closures, and it states that people will be no worse off financially in their new home. Supported by the council, they will also be able to make their own choice of home, and this includes supporting people to move closer to family. People will also be able to choose a home of the same quality. A dedicated team of social workers will work with the person and their family to understand their needs, wishes and aspirations, and will support them when they go through the process of choosing a new home. In some cases, we will ask staff who know the person to support them in their new home for the first week or so to enable them to settle into their new home. The reasons behind the proposal are well set out in the report and were taken into account by Executive Board. This was a difficult decision, and I'm very mindful of the impact this decision will have. I appreciate the views and feelings that have been expressed following the Exec Board and that have resulted in this calling. The Director, Caroline, will address some of the specific issues in the calling papers. However, I would like to pick up the comments made regarding the future investment services in Morley, which were addressed by the leader verbally at Exec Board. The leader stated, and I reiterate, that the council has committed to working with the ward members and the Member of Parliament in terms of looking for future wider funding opportunities, with aspiration that Knoll Manor be used for future health and care services in Morley, if at all possible, and I'll reiterate that commitment here today. These matters will be referred back to a future Executive Board and, of course, discussed with ward members. As Cllr Finnigan has said, the manifesto commitment is to the provision of community neighbourhood health centres with a focus on wider health services. I will continue to lean on and lobby the Minister for Health and Social Care for additional funding in Leeds. In addition, in relation to comments regarding the scope of consultation, it was referenced at the Exec Board meeting that the Council's budget proposal was subject to a citywide consultation prior to the final decision at Exec Board in February. I will now ask Caroline to take you through the Council's responses to the specific issues in the calling documents. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. So if that's okay, Chair, I'll start with the Knoll Manor and then go on to Dolphin Manor call-in points that have been raised. So in terms of the proposal from the MBI group, the response to the call-in points raised for Dolphin Manor, Councillor Arif has already mentioned that any proposals regarding future assets of Knoll Manor will be subject to a return to executive board and of course subsequently a new decision. But it's really important to stress and also to reassure ward members that alternative service models for the use of Knoll Manor have actually already been explored, and these are detailed in the report in paragraphs 62 A, B and D, and they've included exploration of using Knoll Manor as a rehabilitation centre in the way that we're proposing the repurposing of Dolphin Manor. But we are very mindful that the cost of doing this would incur additional significant financial pressures of approximately 600k, but we also know that the costs of building materials and actually undertaking building continues to increase, and that would be just for internal refurbishment alone, and that in itself is absolutely a matter for consideration and the reason why we have not put it as a proposal for reprovisioning. Also, we are doing some work. Councillor Finnigan mentioned the Home First programme. We have been doing some work for the last 18 or so months around looking at what rehab capacity and intermediate care bed capacity we need for the residents of Leeds. And with that, we have identified that actually we already have quite a considerable provision, probably need a little bit more, but that would be in the place of using independent sector purchased step down short-term beds. So having a full complement of intermediate care provision provided by our in-house services. And that has been taken into consideration in terms of how many beds would we need for current and future numbers of people requiring discharge to assess hospital discharge facilities. We know that if we incorporated the Dolphin Manor provision in addition to the 3 recovery hubs that we already have, that would be sufficient capacity to meet the needs of discharge provision within the Leeds population for now and also in the foreseeable future. We know that each of our existing recovery hubs supports around 1,500 people each year to leave hospital in a timely way. So we've absolutely considered both for Dolphin Manor and Knoll Manor what reprovisioning we require in terms of rehab beds, and the Knoll Manor provision would cost us a huge amount of money to refurbish to get it to be suitable for rehab purposes. In terms of the Dolphin Manor points that Councillor Golton has raised, if I could start with the term we've used around service review. We've used that not within the context of a wholesale review of all of our in-house bedded capacity, but within the context of service reviews for the budget proposals only. And within that context, we've only considered 2 of our 3 long-term residential care homes. So it wasn't ever intended that we do a wholesale review of the home care home capacity that we need to retain within the Leeds portfolio. In relation to Spring Gardens, the home has seen significant recent investment, including essential fire safety related works, a new roof, decarbonisation work and an internal refurbishment. All of these were planned pre-pandemic and executed either before or just after the pandemic. And the money that we had available for capital funding for refurbishment was fully utilised for both Spring Gardens and Dolphin Manor, and there was no capital funding left for Knoll Manor. So we've used our public funds that we've already committed to Spring Gardens to say it's a viable proposition that continues to operate as a long-term residential care home for Leeds. In terms of the role that the in-house provision plays in the wider residential market, Councillor Arif has already referred to, and we have brought several reports to Exec Board and also to Scrutiny Boards documenting the Better Lives strategy, which is entirely about what the population of Leeds themselves say they want out of council services in relation to care and support needs. And that has very clearly changed over the years, a decade or so. More and more people have chosen to live at home as their first choice, where they're provided with home care provision to enable them to live and remain living independently in their own homes, and even to end of life. Fewer and fewer people are opting to go into residential and nursing care unless absolutely needed. The council has a duty under the Care Act 2014 to promote a diverse choice of provision and quality of provision. So that is a mixed economy of provision. And within Leeds, we have 51 older people's residential and nursing care homes that are rated good or outstanding by the Care Quality Commission in the independent sector. That provides a capacity of 2,500 beds across Leeds. There are more homes, but they're rated requires improvement. So we've discounted those, only counting those that are a good quality. So in terms of the proposed retention of Spring Gardens, to some extent that does support that offer of a mixed economy of residential care. But we are absolutely confident that there is adequate good quality provision and capacity for residential provision within the market to meet current and future needs, and that not having the provision of Knoll Manor or Dolphin Manor as residential will not impact on the availability of good provision, good quality provision, and a choice of provision. In terms of Dolphin Manor, we have opted to look at Dolphin Manor being repurposed as an in-house recovery hub because we think that will add to the complement of beds, intermediate care beds, that we know through our work with the integrated care board that we need for current and future capacity, to allow that and ensure that flow out of hospital, to give people the opportunity to recover, rehabilitate, and then go home. So the repurposing of Dolphin Manor into an intermediate care provision supports our ability to retain our in-house provision, but use it for a purpose that we know is required within the Leeds area. So in terms of the longer term home capacity, care home capacity, in reality, the council's in-house provision of care homes is relatively small relative to what is available in the wider market. And that has been the reality for many, many years. We've never had a sufficient balance, an equitable balance of in-house provision against external. Our in-house complement of beds has always been quite small. And the proposals for Knoll Manor and Dolphin Manor are not in any way likely to impact on what we pay for independent sector care home provision. The alternative use of each of the services have been explored. They're detailed in paragraph 62 of the report, and any care costs relating to private care home provision is actually going to be offset by the benefits, the financial benefit that we will gain and the long-term savings that we will get within the council through the repurposing of Dolphin Manor. The Home First programme, which has been mentioned, has supported the design of more effective approaches to getting people out of hospital, and also significantly supporting us to achieve a more balanced budget and to make quite significant savings. That is already being evident through the work we're doing on the Home First programme. And Dolphin Manor repurposing will support that priority as well. So all of that has been taken into account. And in terms of the point around the overriding motivation of the review was the ability to bid for the ICB contract, I think Councillor Arif has already stated that the overriding motivation is absolutely to secure savings in response to the incredible financial challenges that the council is experiencing, and our need to ensure that we have a balanced budget and that adult social care is sustainable going forwards. The current procurement activity that is being led by the Integrated Care Board, the tender, within the council, we have no control over when that procurement timeframe was set. But what we're trying to do to the best of our abilities is to align the procurement process with the timelines of what we might be able to do to repurpose Dolphin Manor so that we can utilise it as an intermediate care facility. We've got to be sort of quite fleet of foot, and we've got to be flexible and agile to respond to the outcome of the procurement process. In terms of alternative plans for future use, should the council be unsuccessful in the procurement bid and not win the contract, we're very mindful of that. We can't, of course, preempt any decisions that Exec Board would need to take around the future of Dolphin Manor. We have explored what alternatives we might want to use that facility for, should we not win that procurement process and the contract for the intermediate care beds. But of course, any outcome will then be subject to rigorous options appraisal and be brought back to a future Exec Board for consideration. We have looked at options, and those are within the context of what can we be a specialist provider in, so that we can retain some of our in-house provision and fill a gap in the market. But we will consider that in due course following the outcome of the procurement process. In terms of the consultation process not being applied consistently within the service review, we are very, very clear, and Councillor Arif has covered the point in her opening statement. The Executive Board did take into account wider consultation process within their decision making, but we've looked again. Did we take a different approach with Dolphin Manor compared to Knoll Manor? And I can confirm that absolutely the same a stakeholder consultation approach was undertaken for both the closure proposal for Knoll Manor and the repurposing proposal for Dolphin Manor. And they are detailed in Appendix 3A and 3B of the report. What we did, though, in addition for Dolphin Manor, was to also liaise with our NHS colleagues around the rehab intermediate care capacity requirements and also future commissioning gaps, should we not be successful in the tender submission. I can say confidently that overall the consultations met all legal requirements. They were held at the same time when the proposals were still in at a formative stage. They included reasons in detail so that respondents could give intelligent consideration. There was adequate time given for those people to respond, and the consultation results were clearly given consideration by Executive Board in reaching their decision. There is reference made in the call-in statements to tenancies and legal aspects around a person's stay in a care home. I'd just like to clarify that care homes residents are not under the same requirements as tenancies. They are under license agreements, so different rules apply. No additional duty of care as has been suggested in the call-in request actually applies. The legal duties owed to individual residents by local authority are set out in the Care Act 2014. They relate to services that people receive. They don't actually apply to decisions taken to close or repurpose in-house provision. And finally, just to say that the report to Exec Board makes it clear that our legal responsibilities to meet the needs of those who require care have been properly considered in conducting the review itself. Those responsibilities will continue to be met for all residents while we also meet the Council's legal responsibility to achieve a balanced budget.
Thank you, Caroline. Are there any other officers that you want to comment?
Not at this stage, but obviously we will do if any questions are forthcoming. Thank you.
Okay, well, in that case, I shall open up to members. If you'd like to indicate. Councillor Ritchie.
Thanks, Chair, and thank you, councillors, for bringing this today and the officers preparing the really informative pack for our perusal. I've got a few questions, if that's all right. But the first thing I want to do is just recognise the quality of the staff that work at both organisations, which is highlighted throughout the report from resident feedback, and I think we should be grateful and pleased actually that whatever the decision, their expertise and commitment will be retained in going forward in the new provision and elsewhere, perhaps in the council's services. The first question I've got is around the low occupancy, which seems to be a key driver in making this decision. And again, throughout the report, in the comments of residents and carers and what have you, some people question the accuracy on that. So I would be interested in more detail on low occupancy. And some of the comments about it, the homes being the best in Leeds, it does seem surprising that despite that, there seems to be these occupancy levels. The second question is around, again, some really powerful testimonies in the consultation documents. And again, I welcome the fact that they're included in full with the obviously redacted personal information. Is there any more detail on the impact on residents from previous closures? I do note in some of the feedback, some people have already been subject to this, and yet they do seem happy in the current provision. I can't remember which home it was in, but more detail I think would be welcomed on that to provide reassurance. Councillor Golton makes a really interesting point about that long-term financial impact, linking it into what we've seen in children's residential care. And I know a lot of work goes into mid and long-term financial planning. Has that actually been factored in as a risk that we may end up in that a similar route as clearly private providers have to have their profit margin and so on and so forth? And then my final question, certainly for now, is around what other local provision for care homes is available in those two wards, because again, there's a reference to people wanting to stay locally, and there's been a suggestion that there's nothing in those areas. So clarifying that would be very helpful. I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. So I'll have a go at some of the questions and I will pass on to Cllr Golton, the Head of Service for Care Delivery Services, to answer some of the others, if that's okay. In terms of the occupancy, you will see in the report very clearly that there has been a reduction in occupancy. Now, We know that part of that is through choice. We know that the alternative independent sector provision in the area is more modern build, some of it quite relatively new build, offers ensuite facilities, and people do often choose a home because of its environmental factor. Some people choose it because of their experience when they go into a home, when they walk into a home, the look and feel of the home, the way they're received by staff, but other people choose it specifically around environmental factors. And so people make choices, and absolutely we would facilitate people's choice. There has been a reduction in people choosing to go to Knoll Manor, particularly, and that is because of the physical state that it's been in. And our intention, as I alluded to earlier, was to refurbish all 3 of our long-term homes. That included Knoll Manor, and we sought some capital funding pre-pandemic to do just that, one by one, to close the homes to new admissions for a short period of time whilst we then did the building works, because obviously we have to ensure safety of existing residents, so moving people to different parts of the building. And that was the plan for Knoll Manor as well, but the building works didn't start in the other 2 care homes until after COVID, and the cost of that absolutely skyrocketed and overshot what we had in our budget. We had already started the Spring Gardens renovations before we realised how much the cost was. So it's only once you start the renovations do you see the actual cost climbing. We'd also got an equivalent commitment for Dolphin Manor to do the same. We had earmarked Dolphin Manor, some of Dolphin Manor, to be utilised for specialist dementia provision, because again, this was recognising there's a gap in the market and this is a service that we can actually do well in-house. So the plan was to refurbish all 3 homes, including Knoll Manor, but the cost just has not enabled us to do that. And of course, we've found ourselves subsequently in such a significant financial situation that we've just not been able to bid for more capital funding. That probably has also added to people choosing not to move into, particularly into Knoll Manor. So there is a absolute desire for in-house provision, but people have chosen not to go there, and numbers have been reduced over a 5-year period, and that is detailed in the report. In terms of impact on, as a result of previous closures, what we have done is offered the care guarantee. We've always looked at friendship circles and made sure that alternative provision is located, whether that be in our own in-house alternative provision or in the independent sector, based on people's preferences, and have always worked to ensure we facilitate those preferences, and certainly no adverse financial implications, because we've got that guarantee around picking up any additional cost. So we've not experienced any adverse impact. In fact, you know, we know that there have been residents that moved from the green into our other homes, and also external provision, and there were no adverse impacts noted to us or us informed of them. Your third question around long-term impact and reference to the situation we find ourselves with in children's care homes. In reality, as I alluded to previously, the balance of provision is by far the majority of the independent sector. The fact that we've had 3 long-term residential care homes has not impacted in any way in driving or reducing the impact of independent sector fees. That's a totally different consideration and is based on fair cost of care of purchasing independent sector provision. So, for example, we have no nursing provision within our in-house complement, only that which is in our recovery hubs in partnership with Leeds Community Health, and that is for intermediate care. So we have no long-term nursing provision, and that hasn't had an impact of providers then forcing our hand around fees. There's a very clear process of fee negotiation for the independent sector. And in fact, many local authority areas do not have any in-house residential or nursing provision. So we would see no adverse impact as a result of that. In terms of other local provision within the areas, both for Knoll Manor and Dolphin Manor, if you don't mind, I'll refer to Cllr because she's absolutely done all of her homework and she knows what provision is available.
Thank you, Caroline. With regards to Morley, there are two care homes that provide residential care in the actual Rothwell area itself, as well as in neighbouring locations such as Gildersham and Middleton. With regards to Rothwell, there's only one care home in Rothwell itself, but very close by in neighbouring Alton, there's also another one, and then there's also additional provision in other neighbouring areas such as Middleton as well. Does that answer the question? Thank you.
Is that right? Yeah. Thanks for that. Could I just ask if there's capacity at those that if you're aware of that, please? Thank you.
To not preempt any decision by executive board, I didn't make any inquiries, so I'm unable to confirm at this point.
Councillor Chapman, please.
Yeah, I've got a few questions, but I'd like to go back to the occupancy to start with. I've got some numbers that would call into doubt some of these. So I want to go back to March 2023, which is after the period when Dolphin Manor should have been refurbished, but it hadn't actually started. This is, the report here shows 61% occupancy. Sorry, well, in 2022 and 55% in 2023. In March 2023, there were 28 people in that home out of a potential 35 beds, which comes in at about 80%, I think, occupancy. But if we allow for the fact that actually by that time there should have only been 21 beds, we'd have actually been oversubscribed. Going forward to December 2023, there were 20 people in the home and only 21 beds, as 14 had now been repurposed into the dementia care. So that's given us an occupancy of 90%. This year we've got 15 people. Now, you are showing 45% occupancy. That's 15 out of 35 beds. 14 of those beds are dementia beds now. They're not long-term occupants, long-term residency. So I'd just like to be very clear on what we are saying in this occupancy here, because we are talking about long-term residents. And not these numbers would suggest that the occupancy rates are declining. I would suggest that they're not. The 15 out of 21 for this year, we haven't been able to place any more people into Dolphin Manor since September last year because of the refurbishment work. So I would suggest that there is probably some demand out there that we've not accessed. Yeah, you can come back on that now and I'll gather my thoughts for the next bit.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Chapman. I'll start and then I'll hand over to Cllr, if that's okay. I think it's really important that we've had a mixed range of people who have been utilising the beds at Dolphin Manor. They are not all long-term residents. We've used the facility for respite provision, although even that has not been utilised very well, but also for a lot of short-term provision. It's the long-term occupancy numbers that we absolutely need for the home to be financially sustainable, and that's where we are seeing a decline in the numbers of residents. But I'll hand over to Cllr to say a little bit more.
Thank you, Caroline. So in response to some conversations we've had recently, Councillor Chapman, I've done a little bit more work in preparation for today regarding occupancy. And I'd just like to both refer to the chart in the report that gives a 5-year permanent occupancy to give a picture of what demand looked like for both care homes.
Sorry, we're about to start in the report so members can see it.
Sorry, it's on paragraph 21. So that provides a 5-year view of what permanent occupancy has looked like in both care homes on the chart. So, and that was to also
Give us
then-
a second, sorry.
No
Let's so we can find it and then we can direct members. Everyone got that, page 25. Thank you. Sorry.
Apologies, having some technical difficulties here. The reason why we gave a 5-year picture was to demonstrate what demand looked like before any proposals for the dementia unit at Dolphin Manor and also the refurbishment work. And we can see a decline for both services, both our in-house provision for Dolphin and Knoll over that 5-year period. But in response to Councillor Chapman in preparation, I can confirm that permanent admissions into Dolphin Manor continued, although albeit a staggered approach over 2023 in preparation for the dementia unit and for the refurbishment, with the last permanent admission taking place mid-September, as is demonstrated in the same report just after the chart. There's a paragraph just after, and that's demonstrating that transparency. But a staggered approach was required in order to facilitate the dementia unit. However, the demand is still not there. We're not seeing the the referrals come in over that 5-year period.
If I could also come back in and just say that certainly the industry standard for cost-effective residential and nursing bed provision is a minimum of 85% occupancy. Whether that be independent sector or in-house, and this is significantly below 85% and has been for some time.
I've got some numbers here that were sent to me on the 8th of December. Last year, there were 20 people in the home at that time and only 21 beds, and we'd stopped taking admissions. 17 of those people had been in that home more than 12 months. So that's not a short-term stay. 2 people had been there one person been there 6 to 12 months, and with 2 people less than 6 months. So I do call into question the occupancy rates of this home. It doesn't stack up with what you're saying. And just to go back to the table on page 25, you're saying it clearly shows a decline. It's gone from 47% to 45%. I would suggest that's maybe one person, and the home isn't open. So I do think we should be looking again at the information we're using to base this decision on about demand, because demand does exist. I think I've probably made that point. So can I move on to the other local homes? I'd like to know what the other local home is. I think it may well be Mulgrave House, which is from my understanding of it and from personal experience of trying to get a family member into a nursing or care home, is a nursing home. They won't accept people that do not need bed care. So if you're mobile and moving around, certainly 18 months ago, they weren't accepting people that were in that state. Now everybody in Dolphin Manor is mobile to some extent and certainly isn't getting nursing care. That's the nearest one. That's in the centre of Rothwell. The other one is Alton Manor, which is 1 mile, 2 miles away, which doesn't sound too far unless you're a family member who is used to dropping in and having a coffee and a chat and talking to your family member and the other residents, so they're seeing people all of the time. There are some residents who can't get into their vehicles. So they cannot be, at the moment, they're picked up, taken into Rothwell, they socialise with their friends that they've had all their lives, they go to the pub, they go to the library. They go to social activities, they go to family events because they can be wheeled in their wheelchair. That cannot happen for those people that move to Walton Manor. So I do think, I'm not entirely sure the weight that we've put against the lives of the people that live in care homes has been taken into proper consideration. And as the minimum, to go back to what Cllr Finnigan said before about people being able to stay in their home until it's no longer needed, that isn't in here. We're literally saying people just need to move to accommodate a financial problem. But this home in particular does not contribute anything to the financial problem. What it does do potentially is give you security of income. But as I've already demonstrated, the occupancy rates are wrong. So you could increase your occupancy rates, which would give you the income that you need in any case. So I'm just calling to question some of the information we've been given and the impacts on people's lives. So I guess the question is, if Walton Manor is the other option, we don't know yet if they've got beds available, and how are we going to help the people adjust when they can no longer see family and friends or socialise with their community?
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Chapman. And I absolutely understand how difficult this is. We have considered the impact that this is going to have on current residents and family members. Of course, we have, as well as staff. But I have to come back to the point that occupancy levels below 85% is going to mean that a home is operating at suboptimal levels from a financial perspective. We are in an incredibly challenging financial situation, and we have to make decisions around cost effectiveness as well as requiring to ensure that we meet the needs and preferences of our local citizens. So we have had to do this on the basis of a balance of financial pressure as well. In terms of Walton Manor bed availability, we do know that the turnover for care home placements is often quite rapid, and vacancies do come up very quickly after a decision is taken. We can ensure that we can secure bed provision in a home should that be the choice of a resident and their families. So and we have said very clearly that we would give time to people to be able to find suitable, and I stress suitable, alternative accommodation. Nobody is going to be made homeless or be placed in an environment that is not meeting their needs. I recognise also the point that is made about family members needing to be able to get to the place that their family member has been moved into. And again, we would work towards looking at how that could be accommodated and supported wherever possible. Our primary focus, in addition to the financial backdrop to these decisions, is the well-being of the local residents and their families.
Members, any other questions? Councillor Chapman, I will allow you to go back, but please keep it brief because you've had quite a bit of time. I want to allow Councillor Anderson to come in.
Just some points of clarification from my point to understandings. You did some environmental improvements at Knoll Manor. We've heard about the heating pump that's been put in, etc. So it's been good that you put that investment in, don't get me wrong, but were we aware that it was under threat when we put the investment in? Because there are a number of facilities citywide. Out of any 33 wards, we could probably maybe have better utilised that funding. So is there anything we need to be aware that you've invested and we're not going to get a return from our investment point of view? Because I take what Councillor Arif said, that this is basically a financial decision at the end of the day, because it's to save money because of, well, previous underfunding. Let's keep it as wide as that. Let's keep it as wide as that. Now, there's also been talk of potentially using hospital discharge and also some rehabilitation options. Have any conversations been taking place prior to the decision being made to find out if there's potential, or post the decision, even though you know it's been called in? You know, is there any decisions that you've started to have to assess any of that? In terms of paragraph 28 on the report, at page 27, paragraph 28, it says towards the bottom, this may involve direct delivery by the council, delivery in partnership with external organisations, or disposal to third parties. It's talking about using the site, basically. Have any of those discussions taken place pre or post this decision being made? Because I know we're short of council housing. I know that we're short of extra care housing. You know, have any of those discussions been taking place? Now, I don't, as being new to this particular field, I know in the housing sector, we carry out housing needs assessments to assess future demand. What sort of level of demand do you look into the future to find out what people's potential long-term needs are? And is that updated regularly? Because sometimes some of these things can be done 4 or 5 years ago, the world moves on. And certainly when you take the Morley area in particular, it has been the subject of a lot of housing development, which means that there's going to be a greater number of people in the area than when some of these decisions were made. Is there any truth to any of that potentially being a problem? And then finally, on the staffing, can you reassure me that all staff will either be transferred, offered new jobs, or will be given some sort of financial package if that's not possible? And are we actively trying to help them find jobs nearby? Because, okay, the job might be available further down the road, but without going on stony ground, the bus service might not necessarily be good at that time of the day in order to access it, because we're not talking about people necessarily working standard hours. We're talking about people who are needing to be available all of the time. So if you can give me just reassurance on those particular points. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Again, I shall start on some of them, but I will pass over to Carla with a little bit more of the detail. In fact, I'll ask Carla if you're able to answer the first question from Councillor Anderson. Did some of the based on the refurbishment done at Knoll Manor previously, have we seen a return on our investment in that in relation to that home?
Please could I just clarify with regards to the decarbonisation work? Yeah.
It's the investment in the, I think we had talk about, you've got photovoltaic cells and you've also got a heat pump, which is quite expensive things to put in and, you know, are good things to put in. But it would suggest to me if you were doing that, you had a long-term ambition for a building to actually invest that level.
Yeah. So what I can tell you what I know about the decarbonisation, which is what we call the heat pumps and the solar panels, etc. They were installed by our corporate property management service area. So with regards to return on investment, unfortunately, I haven't prepared a response to your question and sort that out from them.
So you asked a question around have we taken into consideration and had any conversations with our NHS colleagues around Knoll Manor as an intermediate care facility? The answer to that is that no, we haven't. And the reason why we haven't is because we know in the work that we've been doing on the Home First programme, the numbers of beds that we think we would need in the system for the council with its Leeds Health community health provider, how many beds would be required. We know that the cost of converting Knoll Manor into a refurbished and suitable facility to meet the specification for rehab purposes would be quite considerable. And as a result of that, we decided that actually there was no point in having that discussion, whereas the work with Dolphin Manor had already started in terms of the refurb work. So You also asked about have we had any discussions already? Have there been any that taken place around the alternative use of the building? And I think the Councillor Arif did touch on the fact that we will give that some consideration should a decision be taken now to close Knoll Manor. What can we do to utilise the facility or even the space that the building currently contains for adult social care purposes, or even children? So, you know, even looking at community hub options, we will take those into consideration, absolutely, and those conversations will take place. In terms of the future needs of our populations, and particularly residents in Morley, we always look at our joint strategic assessment. We've just recently refreshed our joint strategic assessment, which basically says what is the population, what are their demographics, age range, etc., and what are their future needs going to be. And that also informs what we need to do by way of either providing or commissioning services, be that extra care, for example, or housing stock. We absolutely do take that into account as a council, not specifically and only for adult social care purposes. In terms of your fifth question around all staff, will they all be either transferred to alternative jobs, offered payment should they not want to, so opportunities for early retirement or leaving the council, and also will they receive help to look for alternative work in the area? So we still have quite a lot of in-house provision. We have, particularly for older adults, we have our skills reablement service, which we have much pride in, which is, if anything, growing in capacity to meet the sort of home care, home first objectives of getting people out of hospital. So all of the staff will be given an option to move over and transfer into a home care type role. We have other day opportunity facilities that they could also choose. So we have a huge range of services. We often have vacancies within our in-house services, so there will be more than adequate. I believe the number is 21 staff,
including CEO. I think it's 20 staff.
24 staff. All of them will be given alternative options. We also have what we call a We Care Academy, and that is an in-house workforce team that works with people who want to enter into or transition into or out of social care wider afield, so in the independent sector. So there will be the opportunity to look at options there as well. What we don't want to do is lose our care workers to retail and hospitality jobs. We absolutely want to keep them in the care sector, so that would be our absolute priority for our staff.
Councillor Cllr, and then I'll let Councillor Chapman come back in, please.
Councillor Golton, a direct question. Could I ask Councillor Golton, could you give me more detail about what a service review should include? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I think this is the fundamental element for me, in that I've been on the council for 2 decades at least, and I've seen proposals come forward for individual care homes to be closed, and the argument is always the same. It's always, oh, there's very little demand for the care in that home. You know, that and actually, when you go behind it, you discover that actually the council is 100% in control of the supply of care in the facilities that it has, and oftentimes the low occupancy which is reported is as a direct consequence of the initiative of the care service. So, for instance, I know in terms of Dolphin Manor's circumstances, there was a very large period where it was supposed to be having refurbishment. So people weren't taken in because you don't bring people into a building site. Then the refurbishment got very badly mismanaged. We've already had pointed out to us that We were supposed to have 3 care homes refurbished with the budget that we had that was given to Leeds Building Services. And because of the way that they operate, the refurbishment starts late, for instance, in Dolphin Manor. So there was a whole year of low occupancy, self-imposed low occupancy. And then, of course, there was no money left over to spend on Knowle Manor because that refurbishment operation wasn't done very well. So all of the occupancy and the low occupancy is not down to people not wanting to have access to these homes. They are very well valued. When Dolphin Manor was originally supposed to be closed a good decade ago, when Councillor Eden was in charge, one of the lines was, "Oh, well, it doesn't have ensuite facilities. It would fail any CQC inspection." And of course, since then, it's been retained, and it's got flying colours from CQC because the quality of care which is delivered by Leeds City Council staff is second to none. And the thing is, for us, we've saved Dolphin Manor once a decade ago. Then we had Homely House put down for closure. Homely House has gone. So, and now we're supposed to have Dolphin Manor go in terms of residential care homes. We haven't had any greater capacity for care within Rothwell as a community. And one of the things that we're meant to be doing as a council is making sure that our care delivery is community specific and relevant. For instance, in the home care element, we're doing a big job around making sure that we have contracts with fewer deliverers in a specific community so that they can do it more effectively. And actually the same thing happens with residential care, or it should. And I don't think this service review that we've got is anything like what a service review should be. A service review should be about what does the totality of our service look like? What do we hope to achieve by delivering this service? What value does it have other than the direct benefit to the people who are cared for within our facilities? Because there is a strategic element that we need to take into consideration. The council isn't just a direct deliverer of services. In fact, it's a very small direct deliverer of services, but that means that we are more vulnerable to the demands of the people that we rely on to deliver those services. And people aren't all going to be kept at home for all of their lives. They are going to need residential accommodation to go into when they are no longer able to live their lives. And we need to make sure that in that assessment that we have in terms of a service review, we look at longer term delivery by ourselves and how we deliver a guarantee that there are proper local facilities in all the communities in Leeds, and it isn't just centralised in a particular area or in Leeds city centre.
Caroline, would you like to come back? There's quite a few points made there.
I suppose a lot of what I've already said I would be repeating. I mean, this is based on people choosing where they want to go in terms of residential care. And
Well, there's a specific question, well, accusation almost there, that we sort of that the council has manufactured a reduction in demand. I think that needs addressing directly.
I think several things happened all at sort of sequentially that were not planned. So obviously there was COVID, and what that meant was that fewer and fewer people were being placed in care homes because we were trying to, in fact, fewer people were even going into hospital. The aim was to keep people safe at their own homes. So the demand for new placements overall, not just for our in-house provision, but externally as well, went down quite dramatically, and the demand for home care went up quite considerably. That was a pattern across in-house and external provision. We then had the rise in the cost of building materials, and also it took, Councillor Golton has referred to it, it took a long time for us to get Leeds Building Services to be able to start the refurb work. And it wasn't a case of we were told, no, it's going to be another 12-month delay. We were told, oh, well, we think it will be 3 months. Oh, it will be another 3 months. Oh, it might be another 2 months. And the delays went over a period of time without, otherwise, if we'd have known that we would not be able to start the refurbishment at Dolphin Manor, we would have absolutely started to receive new long-term residents, because it wouldn't be in the council's interest from a financial perspective to shut off the opportunity for new admissions. So it was to absolute frustration for ourselves and our staff that we were finding ourselves in a position where we were being promised that the building works would start, and it wasn't ready to start. And the cost of the materials, the cost of the labour was completely outside of our control. I can assure you that we would not have wanted the refurbishment programme to pan out in the way that it did. And it was absolutely not of our creating. We absolutely pride ourselves in our internal provision, in all of our internal provision. We recognise that it's not always the most cost effective, but it is valued. It's valued, of course, by the people who use the services and their families, and also by our staff. We have immense pride in delivering our in-house care delivery services, but against the backdrop of the financial pressures that we've got, and we're talking about millions and millions of pounds worth of savings that we're going to have to identify because of demand pressure and because of cost of delivery of services, that we have got to make some really tough decisions. And the decisions are either we cut all of our preventative services, our third sector, our services that delay people needing care, or we find alternative, more cost effective ways of meeting some of our higher cost services, such as care homes, such as home care, such as supported living. So we've had to do the whole of that consideration. And our individual by individual approach in care homes has been against the backdrop of finances, managing our finances most effectively, against that of utilisation and usage of provision. And if a service is fully occupied, working well, covering its costs in the main, then we continue to deliver those services.
I suppose a question for myself, which would sort of address one of the points that Councillor Golton made, would be or not, would be were social workers trying to support residents to go into those services, and was it being advertised essentially in support, and social workers were supporting people by suggesting it as a provision?
Hello, thank you, Councillor Gibson. I'd just like to say that social workers work with individuals on an individual basis, and they will offer the choice of homes that's available through our care brochure, and they're also aware of what's available in the local community. So they will speak to people about what's available, and if somebody wanted to move into any of our in-house homes over the last few years, there would never have been anybody telling anyone that they couldn't. So neither the in-house provision nor social workers have had any restriction on placement. The restriction on placement is purely about people's own choice. And that's what we've been seeing over the last few years, is a reduction in people wanting our care homes, which has coincided with the reduction in demand for residential as a whole. So no restrictions have been placed on people's choice to move into one of our homes at all.
Almost be impossible to manufacture a decline then, wouldn't it, if people have the choice to be able to go there and the social worker saying you can pick wherever you want to go? A council couldn't manufacture that to try and close it, could they, I suppose? We're going to go for a comfort break. Back in 5 minutes, please. Thank you. Okay, is everybody sat where they should be and ready to go? Yeah, in which case I shall hand over to Councillor Chapman then, please.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a few things again now, sorry. The first thing I am going to address is this manufacturing, the situation. I just want to say that in 2022, I myself, we weren't getting social worker support, although my mum did have dementia and was deemed needing care because we couldn't look after her anymore. And we rang Dolphin Manor because she's lived on the same estate as Dolphin Manor for 50 years. It was our ideal choice for her. And we were specifically told by the manager at the time that they were not accepting new people because of the refurbishment work. So we weren't accepting people.
Chapman, just bear with me a second.
Okay. All right. Okay.
You're fine, crack on.
Is that okay? Yeah, so all I'm saying, it's just a statement of fact. We were told we couldn't have a place at Dolphin Manor in 2022 because they weren't accepting new people. That's just fact. That's not what I wanted to actually cover, but it does answer addresses one of the points that was made earlier. I'm going back to occupancy very briefly. To get us to 85% viability, we need 3 more people in Dolphin Manor. There are 9 people in Knoll Manor. So even if we accept that Knoll Manor has to close, which the other calling paper accepts that they would like it to be repurposed, those people will need to be rehomed. There is the capacity in Dolphin Manor to do that. And I would still call into question, there is no financial benefit from closing Dolphin Manor as a care home. We are taking away what people have said. Our staff provide a level of care second to none. We're an exemplar, and we are now preparing to put people into a less exemplary situation for no financial benefit. It's because we have changed our minds about what care we want to provide. We don't want to provide in-house residential care anymore. We want to provide intermediate care. Who's to say in another 2 years we won't actually change our minds again? So my question is why the occupancy, I still want to go back to, I still think that is an issue. We're not getting the right numbers, or I don't feel we're getting the right numbers. And then my other question was around the cost to the families. The papers refer to the framework list, which I don't normally sit on this board, so I don't know what that is. I can make a guess that it's suitable properties in our view. And it does say that if a person chooses to move into a suitable property, there'll be no financial impact. If the property is not on the framework list, that resident or their family could be asked to do a top-up fee, and they will have to pay for any supplementary things such as a bigger room. But what happens if the only room that's available is a bigger room in their choice? Will they have to then pay that top-up fee? So there is going potentially some financial impact to a resident and their family of this move. And then ongoing, there'll be the same impact because new people, we keep talking about people not choosing not to go into residential care, and I accept that. There is always going to be a level of people that do need residential care. My mum cannot live at home. She has to be in residential care. So there are people that need to do that. And we've evidenced that with the Green. We talk about the Green and we say 64% of people were successfully able to stay at home. But 103 people weren't. They had to go into some form of care. So there is a need for care. So the demand it may be reducing, it's not going away, it's never going to be nothing. And we should be factoring that in. I mean, we have a statement in our Best City Ambition about care at the right place at the right time. And there's another right, but I can't remember what it is right off my head. And about it being a healthy, caring environment for people of all ages. This doesn't feel like we are doing that. So if a specific, that is a statement, I understand that's a statement. But my question is, what is the financial impact on the families currently and going forward? And can we again look back at this occupancy and why it's not viable, given we know there's at least 9 people need rehoming from Knoll Manor?
Thank you. So between us, we'll cover all of those questions. If you don't mind, we'll start with the occupancy because we would like to challenge the numbers that Councillor Chapman is citing in terms of occupancy. So if you don't mind, I'm going to pass over to Cllr. Cllr's got a table with a month by month occupancy, which is part of the work that we have to do anyway, for all sorts of reasons you'll appreciate. So Cllr will just address the issue around what the occupancy levels are at both of those homes.
Thank you, Caroline. I've just taken the opportunity in the break just to bring up the charts and review them. Just to give you a comparator, thinking about Councillor Chapman's feedback regarding permanent occupancy and occupancy of people who stay in the homes temporarily over a period. If we could refer back to the chart that we mentioned earlier, please, on under paragraph 21. And I'm going to give you, specifically for Dolphin Manor, I'm going to give you a comparator. The figures and the percentages there show the permanent occupancy over the last 5 years. I'm going to tell you what the actual occupancy, including temporary residents, are, and to demonstrate they're still way below the 85% that we need for financially viable services. Now, apologies, I haven't been able to do my percentages for every single year very quickly in that short break that we had, but for last year, for 2023, permanent average occupancy, so taking over the 12-month period, including temporary residents, was 67% in totality. For 2022, it was 81%. For 2021, it was 71%, and for 2020, it was 70%. And what that demonstrates to me is the efforts that service have made to reach out to their social work colleagues, to their networks, to try and increase occupancy as much as they can. So because the demand for permanent residential care hasn't been there, hasn't been seen, service have done absolutely everything they can to reach out and to diversify their offers as much as possible to increase those occupancy numbers. And you can see some of their efforts are clearly there in those figures that I've stated. Now, just for clarity, those figures are taken from the home's registers. They are the registers that are required for CQC regulatory compliance, but also for our internal financial audit activity. So that's where those figures have been taken directly from. Hopefully that helps.
So just to clarify, so because obviously they're different to the percentages that we have here, the 70% compared to 47. So how do we get to the figure of 47% from 70? Is because that there is an allocation of short-term beds, is there, that aren't being utilised as well?
Yes, so they would be utilised for what we call step-down beds. So it might be anybody that needs a temporary period of assessment in a care home to decide whether that person can return to their own home or move on to extra care, or whether they actually need nursing care, etc., period of assessment, for all different reasons. There can be emergency situations that our social work colleagues go out into the communities and deem somebody unsafe because their family care has been admitted to hospital, for example, all kinds of reasons. But the differentiate shows the temporary stays. So none of those people who went to stay in those care in Dolphin Manor over that period that I mentioned in those figures will come in for permanent occupancy. Some do naturally transfer if they become settled and they've got an identified long-term needs and they choose to stay. That option is always and actually a preferred option because they've got to know the service. But hopefully that's helpful to give a comparator and a recognition that even with all those efforts and admission of all those temporary stay, it's still significantly over that 5-year period under the 85%.
Thank you. Sorry, my microphone wasn't on. Then there were several other points you're going to address, please.
Please. So the point around there is no financial benefit for closing Dolphin Manor. Can I just say that actually what there will be is that we will be able to cover the cost of delivering services at Dolphin Manor if we turn it into and win the contract for intermediate care, because then the funding for the provision will be met by the NHS. So in fact, there will be significant financial gain to be had. Not only would it meet council priorities along with the NHS priorities for adequate levels of intermediate care, but actually we will lever in income from the NHS to be able to deliver the services. So it's about continued viability, future viability, in the same way that we've got our 3 recovery hubs. The 3 recovery hubs guarantee its future because we cover its costs through funding from the ICB. We would want to do the same with Dolphin Manor. So in fact, a significant financial benefit. And then the third point that Councillor Chapman raised also, and absolutely understand the concern that not all care homes, independent sector care homes, accept local authority funded residents at the fee rate that we set, our framework fee rate. That's absolutely the case. And quite a few care homes will ask for top-ups, particularly if it's a bigger room, particular part of facilities, particular, it has a back garden that the residents can enter into through their room. So there might be top-ups that are requested. We do not dispute that, but the care guarantee that we have set in place for previous care home closure and will apply here as well, including Dolphin Manor repurposing, will be that the council will meet any additional cost above the framework rate should the care home say, oh, well, that will be an additional top-up requirement. So I'm hoping that that has answered all of the questions that Councillor Chapman raised.
There was an additional one around Councillor Chapman not being able to get a place there for a relative.
I don't think that was a question, Chair. I think that was a statement, and that was anecdotal, and also that's not verified. So, with all respect, Councillor Chapman, I think that that's a question that shouldn't be answered in this forum.
If there's a significant financial benefit, why wasn't it put into the budget plan? So this was consulted on as part of our budget paper, which specifically says there's no benefit, financial benefit from the closure of Dolphin Manor. You're now saying there is a significant financial benefit from doing it. And how significant? Because we still charge people that are in Dolphin Manor quite a lot of money per week to live there. So we must be recovering some of the cost of our staff. So we're only going to cover potentially an incremental part from the fee from the NHS, because we're already covering it from the care home. We're going to lose that by moving people to another home. So we're only filling up a little bit. Do you see what I mean? If at the moment we're covering, say, 75% of the staff costs from the care home fees, and you're going to get 100%, you're only saving 25%. That's not necessarily significant. So again, you can take it as a statement if you like, but it was a financial paper with no financial benefit, and now you're saying there is one. Yeah, okay, thank you.
Caroline, please.
The report didn't say there was no financial benefit. The report said that we would be able to lever in alternative income streams for the provision. So that, and you can then interpret that as what does that equate to? That would then therefore equate to a financial benefit. But the report is very clear. By delivering services that are intermediate care, they would be covered through a different income stream from the NHS.
Thank you. Councillor Rowntree, please.
Thank you, Chair. My question is quite a specific one, and I hope a fairly brief matter. Just thinking about friendship groups, it's something that's been mentioned today, and as mentioned in the report in the course of the consultation that was undertaken with residents. I'm just wondering, can you give any indication from past experience of how successful the service is in placing people within friendship groups and accommodating residents' wishes. It strikes me that it could be a really difficult thing to do, and to be glad of any sort of information on what's the evidence base to suggest that you can accommodate this. Thank you.
I'll ask Carla to come into that, answer that one if that's okay.
Thank you. I refer back to Homely House home closure that I were directly involved in, where we looked at looking for new placements for the residents there, and we were entirely successful in meeting all the residents there's future wishes as to where they wanted to go. I probably want to share a bit of information for colleagues here today. Lots of people look to move to nearer families in some instances. Local communities can be very important to people, as we've seen in the consultation findings report, but other times external factors can contribute. So people might require a reassessment of need, for example, for nursing provision, and whereby that the residential care home would no longer meet their long-term needs anyway. So each person undertakes has a consultation process that's detailed in the care guarantee and the assessment protocol. They will identify where they want to go. But in answer to your question directly, I have every confidence that we will be able to support the residents at Knoll Manor and at Dolphin Manor with their future wishes. In this period, during the court, since the Executive Board decision and during calling period, I've had residents and families approach me and have tentative discussions and been very clear regarding the calling period. You know, that we can't preempt any decisions, but I've been approached regarding any availability that we have in our in-house provision at Spring Gardens. A family and member I met with yesterday asking to be relocated if the decision's taken from Rothwell to Colton area to be near granddaughter. So yes, I have every confidence we'll be able to support people with their wishes.
Okay, thanks. That's reassuring in some ways, but you've not really addressed the question of friendship groups. Is it the case perhaps that it's not one of the leading criteria? I know obviously there are other facts. Maybe it's not so important as I'd assumed it to be from the reports. That people are more concerned about family members and environmental factors.
No, apologies. I'd like to elaborate. So in the conversations I've had recently with the residents who live at Knoll Manor and Dolphin Manor, there's actually two friendship groups that have approached me directly, both stating that they wish to go together, and actually both stating that they would like to express an interest in our Spring Gardens care home that currently has enough vacancies to support those two friendship groups. But obviously we haven't explored that any further because it's subject to decision by the Scrutiny Board, etc. And also we need to take into account everybody's views, all the residents, and to try and meet everybody's needs. But friendship groups are exceptionally important, and we place high value on that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I'm going to be moving on to closing comments soon. If anybody would like to indicate that they'd like to ask a question who hasn't yet had chance to, please let me know. Councillor Miller, Councillor Anderson, that you are next, don't worry. Anybody else? Okay, so we've got Councillor Anderson and Councillor Miller, and then we'll go to closing statements, please.
I just want to explore something that's in the comments that we got in the supplementary pack today that came from the Liberal Democrat request. At the top of page 5 of the documentation I have, where it says explanation continued, brackets, it's the bit after that. It says, it appears that the overriding motivation for the review of care home provision was the ability to bid for an ICB contract for the sole provision of intermediate care facilities in the city. Fine. So is it your understanding that the number of care facilities that would need to be in that contract will actually need to reduce overall, whether it's the council that would lose out or whether it be the private sector ones? And if that was to be the case, what are we doing? If we were to get the contract, what are we doing with the ones that we in the private sector that might lose out? Because that will affect those communities. And are we going to end up with a circular? That basically what I'm saying is, we're going to be back here in a few months' time. That if that was the case, and those wards that are losing their facilities, is that likely to come in a circular argument, or are you confident that it won't affect any wards in a major capacity if you were to get it in-house? It's to clarify the comments, what's beside it. We've not had a chance, Councillor Golton didn't have a chance to express his views, so I'm just looking through what was written down. I suppose I could ask you if you want, yeah, but I would try not to, as a scrutiny chair, I know you tried, so that's why I'm asking it through yourself.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. So what we know is that the ICB, the Intermediate Care Board, in the tender documentation has stipulated that they would like one lead provider to provide all of the intermediate care bed capacity. They don't want a mixture of some provided by the council, some provided by the independent sector. But what they say is that whoever is the lead provider can enter into a contractual arrangement with other providers if they want to ensure the adequate level of beds that are required. The tricky point is that the tender documents do not stipulate the number of beds that the ICB wants to commission. Instead, what they say is that whoever is bidding for the contracts has to work out themselves what capacity they want to deliver based on trajectory of throughput, that is the length of stay in one of these facilities. So if the average length of stay is 30 days, the throughput might be greater than if the average length of stay is 50 days. So they're saying we want an optimum offer of bed capacity, which operates really well and gets people in and out of the bed capacity really quickly. So at the moment, we don't actually know what the ICB is thinking in terms of how many beds it wants. It's quite possible that they might determine that they don't want the independent sector provision, or because they have already indicated they want one lead provider. What that means is that the market will decide what it does with its provision. So if there are independent sector providers, and we know that there are 2 currently in the market that deliver intermediate care beds, and it's very likely that if they don't bid for the whole complement, it's likely that they won't bid at all. In which case that those 2 independent sector organisations, and I'm just surmising because obviously I have had no discussions with any of these alternative providers, they would then have to decide whether they convert their bedded capacity into longer term provision or exit the market, but that is something that I can't comment on. There is also one ward at Wharfdale Hospital, which is also part of the intermediate care capacity, which is entirely provided by Leeds Community Health. Because we are putting in a bid that is joint between the council and Leeds Community Health, that capacity at Wharfdale is included in what we would be bidding for. I hope that answers your question.
Usually if we're closing an undertaking, usually the staff get transferred to the new undertaking to try and protect them, so that if the same is happening in reverse, if the private sector were unfortunately their facilities are being closed, what pressure would that put on? And is there going to be then overcapacity in terms of the council's costs again? That was where I was coming from. That's what I was trying to probe.
So those facilities currently are intermediate care, so that we wouldn't lose the intermediate care bed capacity because we would be the provider of that should we win the contract. So if anything, it is likely to add to capacity by way of long-term provision and probably long-term nursing provision, because both of those services currently deliver intermediate nursing care.
Councillor Miller, please.
I'm going to ask the opposite question to Councillor Anderson. If we're not successful in winning the contract, can Dolphin Manor still be repurposed into a recovery hub? Or is that subject to the community care bed contract being awarded to us?
So yes, it's the latter. We would not be able to repurpose Dolphin Manor for intermediate care capacity if we are not successful in the tender. We would have to absolutely look at alternatives for that provision going forward.
And obviously it's subject to exec board to decide what that looks like if it does happen. But what presumably one of the potential options is that it would also close like Knoll Manor.
I can't answer that, but what I can say for sure is that we are doing really well in some of our dementia provision. We've sort of upscaled the dementia provision that we are delivering. Again, we're only a very small part of the market of dementia provision. The majority is delivered by the independent sector, but we are demonstrating quite a good dementia provision in what we call the Willows. And that's why we looked at using some of the Dolphin Manor beds for dementia provision pre the proposals around intermediate care facility. So we were already on that journey because there's a gap in the market for really good quality dementia provision, not just residential dementia. There's a lot of residential dementia, but not necessarily of high standard, not delivering necessarily good outcomes for people. And we've sort of, at a cost to us, but we have created a really quite a high caliber, high quality dementia provision in-house. There is the option to look at that for the whole of Dolphin Manor, but you know, we absolutely cannot preempt any decisions whatsoever, but that is a viable opportunity, an option for consideration and for consultation on. And also, should that happen, we would need to have those discussions with our ICB colleagues, because again, they would be funding quite a big proportion of that, we would expect.
Okay, thank you, board members, for all those questions. We'll move on now. As I said before, I'll invite Councillor Arif and Caroline Barrier to provide closing statements before I move on to Cllr Finnigan and Councillor Golton, please.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, as I said in my opening remarks, this was not an easy decision to make. It was made against the backdrop of declining use of residential care homes and an increase and investment into extra care homes by the council that is available. And importantly, the decision makes a contribution to the council's budget setting process. We have made a commitment to work with ward members in Morley in terms of looking for future wider funding opportunities, with the aspiration that Knoll Manor be used for future health and care services. I just want to pick up on Councillor Golton's point that this was somehow engineered or manufactured or self-imposed in terms of low occupancy rates. That's simply not true. Nobody comes into this job with that intention, Councillor Golton. The truth is the previous government and the lack of funding within adult social care has brought adult social care on its knees. We as a council are having to make extremely difficult decisions with 24-25 savings of 26 million with in-year pressures of 7 million. So there are extremely difficult decisions to be made, but they're certainly not self-imposed. I am completely aware of the impact that this change has on families, and can reiterate our commitment that the transfer will be undertaken with a great deal of care and at minimal detriment to the people and families concerned. Thank you. So
You very much. So, yes, just 3 points, if that's okay. So, in my statutory role as a Director for Adult Social Services, it's a statutory role in the Care Act. I'm required to balance the requirement to ensure that people have sufficient choice about their care services, and that we have a viable market of independent sector, and if we desire it, some in-house provision, balanced with the need to ensure we have value for money. I have to ensure that the council's adult social care services provided, whether provided in-house or commissioned externally, are cost effective and offer value for money. Councillor Arif has already said our financial challenges within the council and within adult social care as well, because of considerable demand pressures, are indeed considerable, and we have to make every effort to ensure that we are using public funds in the most cost-effective way that we can. As it's made very clear in the report, we have given careful consideration to the demand for these services now and in the future, the availability of alternative services within the wider market to ensure people have sufficient choice, and of course the implications for residents, their families and the care staff, all balanced against the costs of running these services. And our proposals are based on all of these considerations.
Thank you both. It's Councillor Finnigan now then, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the opportunity of putting our particular case. If we could just respond very briefly to some of the issues that have been raised, certainly by Councillor Ritchie. In terms of the alternative residential care in the Morley area, you've got one on Street Lane that failed its CQC report. You had one on Brunswick Street that failed its CQC report. You've got one on Springfield Crescent, which is as old as I am, clearly frayed at the edges in the way that I am. And you've got one on Springfield Crescent, which is equally as old as I am as well. And another one on Broncliffe Road that's even older than I am, if that's believable. So in terms of the alternative provision in the Morley area, all you've got is Owlet Hall, which is a specialised service that provides particular care for dementia, and I think nursing care, from correct on that one, up in Driglington. So the alternatives are not lovely, shiny, new, brilliant buildings. One of the issues that was raised at that particular point. And again, what we're suggesting is that we don't accept any new admissions, that we just keep the people there and give them a lifetime home, while looking at alternatives in terms of re-provisioning this particular property to deal with the bed blocking issues. Just a reminder, £1.9 billion it is suggested is wasted as a result of bed blocking, 13,000 plus patients in a position where they need to be in different care settings, often in rehabilitation care settings, to enable them to get back home or to go to appropriate accommodation. We have banged on all the way through this particular hearing about extra care provision. Extra care provision is essentially Morley. It has not been provided, notwithstanding our best efforts and discussions we've had with the City Council over the last 14, 15 years. And that's something that we really do need to revisit. And what we're suggesting is just a pause at this particular point. We're all agreeing in the direction of travel. The new government is agreeing in the direction of travel, and that some way we can repurpose this building to make sure that it does become an adult social care hub, whatever alternative it may be in the future. And I'm grateful for the exec board member for exploring that and exploring that in a positive way. All we're really saying is go a little step further and allow those residents already there to continue the rest of their days while we explore the alternatives and the options at that particular point. Outside that, I've nothing more to add. Thanks very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Finnigan. Councillor Golton now, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to re-emphasise.
Councillor Finnigan, just turn your microphone off, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to re-emphasise the fact that the administration makes the decisions that they make. And the challenge here is not, you do not have the right to make decisions. The challenge here is to say, have you actually done the due process to ensure that the decision that you take and that elected members ultimately take after being recommended by officers, that they have all the information that they need to make sure that it's the right decision going forward. I still am not convinced by what I've heard today that the short-termism which drove this decision has been sorry, I'm losing my track here. It's a very short-term decision, and therefore we haven't taken into consideration the need for a longer-term vision for what is a service review. The council delivers direct care. It used to deliver a lot more of it, Chair, and over the years, in a piecemeal fashion, we've shaved off elements of it and said, we can't afford this, we can't afford that. We'll try something else. In terms of the communities of Morley and Rothwell, which used to have their own councils, let's remember this, and it's one of the reasons why sometimes we have our own facilities that were focused on our own communities. Over time, we've seen us lose facilities. So Seagan Manor got lost in Morley, and they were told, you've still got one left. You've got no manor. There's still somewhere to go if local. In Rothwell, we had Homely House. We were told, you've got 2 homes. You can afford to lose one. We haven't got a lot of money to go around. We had an investment programme in Dolphin Manor, which local people supported, and many people looked forward to providing excellent standard of accommodation for the future care that was needed, including, of course, a dementia wing, which pointed out that the care services are taking into consideration the new demography of care, and that people were getting older, and as they get older, they have greater complications in terms of how they're looked after. The decision here, which has been called a service review, is actually very short term. It has effectively said, we have an opportunity. We have an opportunity to get a contract from the Integrated Care Board, which will help us out majorly financially. And in terms of our financial oversight, the people who are in the Treasury section of the council will be patting you on the back and going, thank you very much. You're taking the right decisions for a council that's really under pressure financially. However, when we're talking about care, finance cannot be the primary driver. And when we take them at short notice like this, it's been emphasised today, for instance, we don't know what the alternative is for Dolphin Manor if it isn't made into an intermediate care facility. There's no commitment to say, actually, we will continue to have it as a residential care home. There is no commitment from Adult Social Care to say that they value the direct delivery of residential care services by Leeds City Council. The Spring Gardens has been left out of what was supposed to be a service review of delivered care. By doing so, they have isolated it and put a great big question mark over it in terms of the commitment that the council has to delivering direct care. That's why I think, Chair, this really needs to be taken back so that we can look at what the potential consequences are of this asset management plan, whereby we say, we've got a very well refurbished building over here because it's had a lot of money spent on it recently. It's perfect for us to put into a contract deposition to the Integrated Care Board so that we can take over intermediate care in the city. If we do take over the intermediate care in the city, as has been pointed out, there will be consequences elsewhere. There is a domino effect. There are independent intermediate care facilities in Chapel Allerton and Armley, who will also have a great big question mark put over them as a consequence of this decision. It needs to have a much wider remit. It needs to have a much greater consideration in terms of the impacts and the different options that we might have should this outside decision maker, which what the ICB is, actually not deliver what the service wants. In the meantime, we've got residents, for instance, in Dolphin Manor, who when the refurbishment happened were told, we're going to consult with you as to what colour your room is going to be in the future. And in the middle of that consultation, they got another consultation which said, actually, you're moving out. Where do you want to go? It's not a professional way to deliver care in the city. And we really should reconsider this decision.
Thank you, Councillor Golton. So we will now move on to agenda item number 8, which at this point, board members will be asked to cast their vote in terms of the outcome of today's calling meeting. In doing so, I would like to propose that the board vote separately on 2 distinct elements of the executive board decision with regards to Knoll Manor Care Home and Dolphin Manor Care Home, particularly given that one of the call-in requests considers today has only focused on the specific elements of the decision that relates to the closure of Knoll Manor Care Home. When casting your vote, the options available are option 1, to release the decision for implementation, and option 2, to recommend that the decision maker that the decision be reconsidered. I will therefore now ask the board members to cast their vote by show of hands in relation to the decision set out in minute 21A that the closure of Knoll Manor Care Home be approved and that once closed, the building be declared surplus to service requirements. So we have option 1, please, panel members, to release the decision for implementation. And I can have a show of hands for that, please. Okay. And then we have option 2 to recommend that the decision to the decision maker to be reconsidered. And we have, can I have a show of hands for that, please? Okay. So that is actually carried with option 1. And now we'll move on as well. Sorry, bear with me a second.
Sorry, Chair. Yeah, just to clarify at that point in terms of that vote, so the board has agreed by majority vote to release that specific element of the decision in terms of resolution minute 21A. Just for clarification purposes as well, in doing so, the respective actions that are set out in minute 21 C and D of the executive board decision will also be released, and that's with regards to the specified timelines and responsibility for implementation in relation to Knoll Manor. Thank you.
Thank you for clarifying that, Angela. Right. I'll now ask board members to cast their vote by show of hands in relation to the decision set out in minute 21B that the repurposing of Dolphin Manor into a community care-based bed recovery hub be approved. So again, those in favour that the decision be implemented, option 1, please show your hands. Okay. And then again, option 2, that the decision be reconsidered, please indicate. Okay. And again, that is carried. Angela, I'll hand over to you.
Again, so, Chair, just for clarification, so the board has agreed by majority vote that the decision in relation to resolution minute 21B be implemented, and in doing so, the respective resolutions of 21 C and D are also released for implementation. Thank you, Chair.
Okie dokie. Well, now we're on item number 9 and the date and time of the next meeting. You'll all be glad to hear that it'll be Councillor Scopes chairing that meeting on the 10th of September, 24 at 1:30. Thank you. And that concludes today's business.